Hi, I'm Dr. Felicie Dhellemmes, and on behalf of all of my collaborators at the Bimini Shark Lab and beyond, it is my pleasure to present our long-term study on shark personalities. Within populations, animals behave consistently differently, and this is what we call animal personality. These differences in behavior are something that's pretty obvious to a lot of people, scientists and non-scientists alike. If, for example, you go to the dog park and look at dogs, or if you've been lucky enough to dive repeatedly with the great hammerheads in Bimini, you will have noticed that individuals behave consistently differently. This is animal personality. Scientists have been studying animal personality for decades, but quantifying individual differences in behavior is easiest to do on small animals that you can keep captive. For example, your favorite house spider. So our shark personality adventure started in 2012 with Dr. Jean-Sébastien Finger. Jean started by developing tests that allowed us to quantify personality in juvenile lemon sharks. He did so using semi-captive settings that allowed him to control for the environmental conditions such as how hungry the sharks were. One of the tests that Jean-Sébastien developed quantified sociability. The other one quantified the willingness that sharks had to explore a novel environment. This test is called the novel open field. And in 2013, I joined the project to understand whether sharks habituate or not to this test. Spoiler alert, they do. But if the existence of animal personality is so obvious, why is it even interesting? Well, imagine a world where all the food resources are up on tree. The smaller individuals would be at a disadvantage, while the taller individuals would be at an advantage. All the smaller individuals could hope for would be for their progeny to be taller and better suited to the environment. In opposition to physical traits that you can't change, behavior is plastic. So in theory, one could expect individuals to change their behavior to maximize their fitness in changing environmental conditions. In which case, why would individuals be consistently different in their behavior, and why would personality even exist? Well, it takes a lot of time and effort to be good at everything. So in reality, animals may be able to behaviorally specialize and increase their fitness outcomes thanks to trade-offs. Let me walk you through a theory that explains just that, the pace of life syndrome hypothesis. Imagine animals within a population that differ consistently in how willing they are to explore new environments. The least explorative individuals will be less likely to make deadly encounters with predators, and they will live longer. In return, they might also be less likely to encounter rewarding food resources, and they will grow slower. In this case, the fitness advantages of being a fast explorer or a slow explorer are balanced out. That sounds good, right? Well, in reality, this hypothesis has received very mixed support. And scientists think that this is because most of the work is done in captivity, when in reality, this will depend on the environmental conditions. So work in the wild is necessary. So for my PhD, we took advantage of Jean-Sébastien Finger's great tests, of the fact that Doc Gruber had been monitoring the Bimini lemon shark populations for decades, and of the opportunity to track and monitor sharks in the wild to test this pace of life syndrome hypothesis. But we added a few details. First, captive tests should be a relevant indicator of wild behavior, so more explorative sharks should be found to express more explorative behaviors in the wild, for example, be found further offshore. These more dangerous offshore habitats should be where those explorative sharks are foraging, explaining their differences in growth rate. One good way that one can see where a shark forages is through stable isotope analysis. So we expected the more explorative sharks to have more offshore stable isotope signatures. Finally, sharks are more likely to escape predators maybe when they are in a social group. So we expected the most explorative individuals to be the least social. We tested all of this across years while monitoring very important ecological conditions. Namely, we monitored how many conspecifics were present in the population, which is a proxy for competition, and we monitored the relative predator abundance thanks to a concurrent acoustic telemetry project. We found these ecological conditions to play a key role in the relationships we expected in our hypothesis. The most explorative sharks were indeed the least social, but only in years where very few newborns were in the populations. When a lot of new lemon sharks were born, the most explorative sharks were the most social. In the North Sound, a shallow protected lagoon that has very few accesses to predators, the most explorative sharks were found the furthest offshore, they grew the fastest, and the fastest growing sharks were more likely to die, according to our hypothesis. But just a few kilometers away, in Sharkland, an area that's much more open to predators, all sharks were found close to the shore, regardless of their personality. Fastest growing sharks were still most likely to die, but personality had nothing to do with growth. When predators were not abundant, the most explorative sharks had offshore stable isotope foraging signatures according to our expectations. But when the amount of predators got really high, the most explorative sharks were instead found to have inshore foraging signatures, and the least explorative sharks were found offshore. This might be because they were avoiding the higher competition in the inshore habitats. Overall, I think our study has been really useful in advancing our understanding of animal personalities as a whole. In Bimini's lemon sharks, support for the pace of life syndrome hypothesis depended on the presence of competitors or of predators in the system, and sometimes we found things that really surprised us. For example, the fact that more explorative sharks sometimes fed inshore and the least explorative ones were found offshore. This work re-emphasizes that personality doesn't mean that animals behave consistently, but instead that individuals differ in their average behavior between one another, with still a lot of room for behavioral plasticity. In dangerous conditions, for example, explorative sharks behaved just like their non-explorative conspecifics and stayed close to the shore where it was safer. These adjustments in behavior were visible from year to year in our study, but we do not know anything about short-term behavioral adjustments, and this might be an interesting thing to look at in the future to better understand exactly how personality can help with management of shark populations, for example. This work is currently on hold due to difficulties obtaining scientific permits, but we do hope to see many more inspiring work on shark personality in the future across species and body sizes. This would complement not only our work, but all of the other excellent work that has been done on shark personalities by other labs. I hope you enjoyed this talk, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to find me. It was a pleasure talking to you today. Bye!